The gate to our private community wasn't just a barrier, it was a promise of safety, of privacy, of a peaceful life away from the chaos of the city. We paid a premium to live behind those gates, and every member of our HOA was proud of the security it provided. For my wife and I, who had recently moved here for a quieter life, it was a symbol of our new beginning. We had left the frantic pace of our old lives behind to build a sanctuary for ourselves. The gate was our guardian, a final line of defense against the outside world. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the promise was broken. I was in my home office when I heard a sickening, metallic screech, followed by a loud, jarring thud. I looked out the window and saw a black SUV, its grille caved in, driving away from our gate, which now lay mangled and broken on the ground. A woman with a sleek ponytail and a panicked look on her face was on her phone, yelling into it, oblivious to the destruction she had just caused. She sped off, leaving a trail of shattered metal and a very expensive mess behind her. That was my first introduction to the woman who would later become known as the HOA Karen. Little did I know, this wasn't just an accident. It was the beginning of a deliberate and calculated campaign of entitlement and corruption. My first instinct was to handle this with reason. I believed in the power of evidence and a straightforward conversation. I sent a polite email to the HOA board, including a description of the car and the license plate number had managed to catch. I fully expected an apology and an insurance claim. What I got back was a master class in gaslighting. The HOA Karen, let's call her Linda, responded to my email, ceasing the entire board. Her email was a mix of accusations and outright lies. She claimed the gate was already broken and that she was a victim of an unsafe community gate. She even accused me of trying to shake her down for money. I was stunned. I couldn't believe someone would be so brazen. I tried to schedule a meeting with the HOA board, but Linda shut me down at every turn. We can't waste the board's time on your personal disputes, she wrote in an email. It became clear that she held a lot of power on the board and that her fellow board members were either intimidated by her or simply didn't care enough to get involved. I felt like I was in a one-man fight against a giant, bureaucratic machine. I had the truth on my side, but she had power and entitlement. The more she lied, the more I became obsessed with finding the truth. I knew what I had seen. I had a blurry video from my own camera, but it wasn't enough to prove anything in front of the board. This wasn't about an insurance claim anymore. It was about justice and the principle of standing up to a bully who believed her wealth and social status gave her a free pass to do whatever she wanted, without consequences. The email exchange quickly devolved from a polite request for information into an all-out digital war. Linda, emboldened by the lack of support from her fellow board members, became increasingly aggressive. She sent another email, this time accusing me of harassment and threatening to report me to the HOA's official disciplinary committee. The irony was suffocating. She, a person of authority, was using her position to intimidate a new homeowner for her own reckless actions. Her sense of entitlement was so immense that she genuinely believed she could break the rules and then punish me for calling her out. I spent days poring over the HOA's bylaws, trying to find a clause that would protect me. I called every member of the board, but my calls were either ignored or met with polite but firm refusals to get involved. It's a delicate situation, one of them told me. It was at that moment that I knew this wasn't a simple HOA dispute. This was a corruption. This was a system that was designed to protect the powerful, and she was at its very core. She was like a king in a miniature kingdom, ruling with an iron fist, and the other board members were her silent, intimidated subjects. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that this gate incident was just a symptom of a much larger, more deeply rooted problem. This wasn't about a broken gate. It was about the very soul of our community, and for the first time, I felt a deep, profound anger. She had messed with the wrong homeowner. She had pushed me too far, and I was about to show her what happens when a bully meets someone who has no intention of backing down. Linda's denials and lies didn't just make me angry. They made me curious. Why was she so desperate to avoid responsibility? I started to feel like this was more than just a gate incident. It was a test. And she didn't know the most important thing about me, my profession. I'm not just a new homeowner in this community. I'm a professional civil engineer. And not just any engineer, I was the lead engineer for the entire infrastructure of this community, including the gate she had just destroyed. I had designed the gate, the roads, the plumbing, and every single inch of this block. I had every blueprint, every construction plan, and every legal contract, and I knew the gate was not only designed to be completely safe, but also to be virtually indestructible. This gate wasn't just a simple metal barrier. It was a complex piece of engineering. It had a kinetic sensor, a hydraulic pressure system, and an emergency stop feature. It was designed to withstand a direct impact and alert the HOA board of a collision, and I knew exactly who to call and what information to provide. I was not just a disgruntled homeowner. I was the architect of the very system she was trying to get out of paying for. Her recklessness was now my perfect weapon. All the frustration, all the lies, all the anger I had felt suddenly coalesced into a single, cold, hard plan for justice. I was about to show her the difference between being a resident and being a creator. She had sped through a gate I built, and now she was about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong homeowner. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the sweet, beautiful irony of it all. Linda, in her self-absorbed entitlement, had hit the one person in this entire community who had the full, detailed knowledge of the very thing she had destroyed. She had a mountain of evidence against me, but I had the full design and engineering schematics of the very thing she was trying to get away with. I knew the gate's exact specifications, its inner workings, and the precise type of damage her car would have done. All the lies she had told that the gate was already broken, that it was unsafe, that it was a flaw in the system, I knew they were all lies. I had a full, complete file of the entire project, and I had a digital log of every single thing that had been done. I had the transparency of the community, and I was about to use it to expose her for the fraud she truly was. She thought she was just fighting a homeowner. She had no idea she was fighting the architect. This was a battle she was destined to lose from the very beginning. Her corruption had led her to her ultimate downfall. My quiet life had been disrupted, but my professional life had given me all the tools I needed to fight back. Her entitlement was her biggest weakness, and my professionalism was my biggest strength. And I was about to show her what happens when a professional is pushed too far. She was about to find out that a lie can travel halfway around the world, but the truth can get there in an instant. Linda had called an emergency HOA meeting to clear the air and discuss my disruptive behavior. She thought she was going to expose me as an out-of-control neighbor. She had no idea what I had prepared for her. I arrived at the meeting with one simple item, a USB drive. I waited for her to finish her tirade, to make all her accusations, and to lie one more time about the pre-existing damage to the gate. When she was finished, I simply stood up and asked the board for a moment of their time. I plugged the USB into the projector, and the room went silent. The first thing they saw was a security video from my own camera. It wasn't the blurry, distant footage I had seen. It was a crystal clear, high-resolution recording that showed her car, her license plate, and her face as she barreled through our gate. The footage was accompanied by a timestamp and a detailed report from the gate's internal sensor. I had not only designed the gate, I had also installed a personal camera that was invisible to the naked eye. The HOA Karen's face went from smug to utter panic. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and betrayal. It was at that moment that her power, her reign, and her entire house of lies came crashing down. She had sped through a gate I built, and now she was about to pay for it. The room erupted in whispers. She tried to deny it, to claim the video was fake, but the evidence was overwhelming. I had a full dossier on her, a mountain of evidence that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was a liar and a fraud. Her entitlement was her biggest weakness, and my professionalism was my biggest strength. I stood there, watching her world collapse. She wasn't just losing her position on the HOA board. She was losing everything. The respect she had demanded, the authority she had wielded, it all disappeared in that moment. The transparency of her lies was now visible to everyone. She walked out of the meeting alone, her head down, a woman who had lost everything in a single moment of exposure. We never saw her at another HOA meeting. The fees were immediately overturned, the board was reformed, and for the first time, our community felt like a true community. The victory wasn't just mine, it belonged to all of us. The truth, once spoken, cannot be unsaid. After that final, explosive HOA meeting, a strange, profound silence fell over our street. The woman who had ruled our community with an iron fist of fines and regulations was no longer a person of authority. She was a pariah. Neighbors who had once been polite and distant now actively avoided her. People would cross the street rather than walk past her house. Her reign had ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, social shunning that was perhaps a more fitting punishment than any lawsuit could be. But silence was not enough for justice. The day after the meeting, I took all the evidence, the property deeds, the names of the shell companies, the recordings of our phone calls, and compiled a full legal dossier. I went to a lawyer, a man who specialized in real estate law, and laid everything out on his desk. He listened with a stone-faced calm, but his eyes widened with every document I handed him. He said this was more than just an HOA dispute. This was a case of systematic corruption and fraud. We immediately filed a formal complaint with the county and began preparing a civil lawsuit on behalf of the entire community. What she had done was not just unethical, it was illegal. Her own greed and overreach had created a paper trail that was impossible to deny. The legal process, as it often does, moved slowly, but with an unyielding certainty. The entitled woman was forced to hire her own lawyers, and her life was now consumed by court dates and depositions. She had spent years believing she was above the law, that her position on the HOA board gave her a free pass to manipulate and intimidate others. Now, she was a person of interest in a criminal investigation and the defendant in a civil suit, facing not only the loss of her power, but the loss of her fortune as well. Her carefully constructed empire of lies, built on the intimidation of her neighbors, was crumbling around her. She had won the battle for so long, but in the end, her victory was her defeat. The most beautiful part of the aftermath was watching our community heal. The day after the meeting, our neighbors, people who had been too afraid to speak up, came to our house. They brought us baked goods, cards, and most importantly, their heartfelt thanks. One by one, they told us their own stories of harassment at the hands of the former HOA president. One family had been forced to pay a huge fine for a child's swing set. Another was forced to repaint their house because the color was too vibrant. For the first time, our community was truly transparent. The secrets were out in the open, and the silent code of fear was broken. Our victory was never about money or a simple fine. It was about something much more profound. It was about standing up for what is right, even when it seems impossible. It was about proving that a single act of transparency can bring an entire regime of corruption to its knees. I wasn't a lawyer or a detective. I was just a concerned homeowner who was tired of being pushed around. I had no idea that my small fight would uncover such a massive crime. But in the end, her downfall wasn't due to a grand plan or a brilliant scheme. It was because her greed and her sense of entitlement were so immense that she never once thought that her newest neighbor would be the one to bring her down. And now, she is a mere footnote in a cautionary tale, a Reddit story of how quickly power can be lost when it's built on a foundation of lies. Her story is a Reddit story of entitled people, and it serves as a powerful reminder: you can't own a community. A community owns itself. The legal process, as it often does, moved slowly. It was a tedious, bureaucratic dance of lawyers and paperwork, but it was a dance that we were winning. The evidence was irrefutable. Her lies, her corruption, her sheer entitlement had created a paper trail a mile long. Her lawyers tried every tactic: delay, denial, and even an attempt to blame the HOA board for a failure to maintain. But it was no use. I had a full, complete file of the gate's construction, every maintenance log, every repair order. I had the video, the timestamps, and the detailed report from the gate's internal sensor. Her arrogance in thinking she could get away with it was her undoing. The lawsuit wasn't just about a damaged gate. It was a civil case that exposed a pattern of systematic fraud. We sought not only the cost of the gate's repair, but also damages for emotional distress and the abuse of her position on the board. And in the end, we won. She was forced to settle, paying every cent we demanded, and the HOA used the money not just for the gate, but for other repairs that had been long ignored under her rule. Her legal defeat was final, and with it, any last shred of her power was gone. She was a woman who had tried to build an empire on a foundation of lies, and now, that empire had crumbled into dust. The beautiful irony of it all was that in trying to tear down my life, she had built something far better for everyone else. The new HOA board was made up of reasonable, honest homeowners who were truly dedicated to the well-being of the neighborhood. The absurd fees have been rescinded, the arbitrary rules are gone, and our block is now a place where neighbors genuinely look out for one another. The quiet fear that had once permeated our streets has been replaced by a sense of genuine trust and camaraderie. It's a feeling that you can't buy, and one that she could never have understood. She thought she was building an empire, but all she was doing was creating an opening for a real community to be born. Looking back now, I don't feel anger towards her anymore. I feel a kind of pity. She was so consumed by her own greed that she never saw the beauty of the very thing she was trying to destroy. She had a grand plan to acquire all the homes, but she failed to realize that what makes a house a home isn't the deed or the size, but the people who live in it. Her story is a Reddit story of entitled people, and it serves as a powerful reminder. You can't own a community. A community owns itself. And as for our house, the one she targeted, it became a symbol, not of our wealth, but of our resolve. It's the place where we stood our ground, where we fought for what we believed in, and where we ultimately found a peace that is deeper and more meaningful than anything we could have bought. We came here looking for a home, and in the end, we found one, not despite the HOA Karen, but because of her. She brought the fire, and in doing so, she showed us what our community was truly made of. The gate, now fully repaired, stands as a monument to our resilience. It's no longer just a physical barrier. It's a symbol of our collective victory over tyranny. It closes not just to protect us from the outside world, but to remind us that we, the homeowners of this community, are the true guardians of our peace. We have learned that the greatest form of power is not what you can take from others, but what you can build together. And for that, I am forever grateful.